This is Closer to the Fire from the Voice of the Martyrs Canada, with a focus on the persecuted church around the world. I'm Greg Musselman. Being a follower of Jesus in Pakistan is difficult, and for many believers, it's extremely dangerous. Christians are falsely accused of blasphemy, imprisoned as a result, and face death threats, and some are even killed. Christian girls are kidnapped and forced to marry men much older and converted to Islam. Many are given the worst jobs, and others even become slaves. Churches and homes belonging to Christians are burned down. Now, here's just one recent example of some of the terrible things our brothers and sisters are facing in Pakistan. Sunil Masih, a young man, he was with some other Christian youth, and they were standing in a market in Punjab's Jaranwala district when 6 men arrived on motorcycles shouting, "Kill all the Christians." At some point, a bullet was fired, killing 14-year-old Sunil. Now, during the attack, another Christian youth was grazed with a bullet. The assailants then fled the scene. Sunil was rushed to a local hospital and unfortunately was pronounced dead on arrival. The perpetrators are reportedly members of a pedophile criminal gang known for targeting the followers of Jesus. According to a local pastor, the gang is well known by police, and their criminal activities have often been ignored. A pastor by the name of Asif said, "Their vile depredation target the weak Christian community because authorities ignore our pleas." Yet, in spite of all the opposition to the gospel and the followers of Jesus, the church continues to grow in this hostile environment. Anis Khan and his family know firsthand the cost of being Christians in this Muslim-majority country in Pakistan. They now live in Canada. Anis joins us from Welland, Ontario, near Niagara Falls. Anis, thank you for being on Closer to the Fire.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's a privilege to be there.
You know, when you hear the story about Sunil, a young man and a youth, they're just at a market and they're shot at, and Sunil dies. I mean, these are unfortunately not uncommon stories. I wish they were. When you hear something like that, how do you react?
Awesome. So stories like that breaks my heart. Like listening to Sunil, like he was just a bystander, 14-year-old. Like it just breaks my heart. Just being Christians, you're being killed, you're being persecuted. And I faced it firsthand. Like I was 13-year-old when I got kidnapped just because of that. So I can relate to what it's going through with Sunil's parents right now. What they're going through. It literally breaks my heart. It's so sad to hear stuff like that.
It is. And, that's just one story. We heard another 2 young brothers in Punjab province as well. They were kidnapped, beaten, and then a video was made of them claiming that they had converted to Islam. Now, we know that's not the case. The other problem, of course, is that when the police, hear these reports, that they often go ignored. So then you've got, even more injustice happening. We'll talk more about some of the things that are going on in Pakistan. I want to get your story. You alluded to it already. You were kidnapped. But before we get to that, tell me, Anis, what was it like growing up in Pakistan and being a follower of Jesus?
So it was in Pakistan, when Christians are not even like, they don't even tell them you're a citizen of Pakistan. They said you're third class citizen. They call you're like infidels, like you're unclean. So even when we were used to go to restaurants, so they have a spot on the side. Like it's not even, you don't even go inside the restaurant to eat. So you have to stay outside of the restaurant to eat. It was, and I always felt I was not worthy to be Christian sometime. And I was like, Bible, because my dad was a pastor, he always told me like, you are, you're Jesus, God is your king. Like, you're a child of a king. I'm like, I'm not being treated as a king's child. So it was very hard for me learning all those things. And sometimes even I thought, maybe is there even a God to exist? Maybe there's no God, and we're just suffering just because we're Christians, and look at the other people. So it was very hard even going to the school. Like I didn't have any friends, because even I went there, I never told them I was Christian. And I would never even talk to them. I had no friends growing up in school. It was a very hard time growing up in Pakistan.
Now, you mentioned your dad was a pastor, so you grew up in a Christian home. How far back generationally does it go in your family when there was a commitment made to follow Jesus?
It was my great-grandfather who was he worked in the Queen's Army. Like when it was before like Pakistan and India was under British government, British rule. So my great-grandfather, he was working for Queen. And at that time, when he came back after serving, he had this heart for serving the people, because when he came back, he saw how Christians are suffering. They had they had no place to actually worship. And that's when it started, like long time ago. And my father followed my great grandfather, and that's how the whole story started.
That's amazing because there's been years and years of living for your family, a situation where you're not only minorities. I mean, in Canada, I've, many friends that, they've come here and they're minorities in the culture, but not treated as second class citizens. But you and your family have been. So when you're at school, Anis, how was it for you? Because you're being taught the Quran at
Yes.
school and the Bible at home. For a young man, that must have been very confusing for you.
It was very confusing. Even we had to go to mosque sometime to worship, like pray 5 times, because the school I was going to was a government school,
Right.
and you have to go to mosque like whenever there's a prayer time. So because I was kind of forced to go, even if I didn't want it to go, and it was very critical. When I was learning at home versus I'm learning at school is totally the opposite. It was a very hard time.
How did you then overcome that? Is it because your family were so strong? Your dad was a pastor. You must have got a lot of instruction at home then.
Yes, so it's mostly my mom told me, like, no, my dad was always like talking about Bible, but mom is always telling me how you need to communicate with people. Like when you're out there, you need to not tell people, like just go there, just stay quiet, just do what they're doing and just come home. You don't need to argue with people. You don't need to talk to them and tell them like what they are teaching is wrong or what you're learning at home is correct. Just go there, do your thing. Just you going there just for school and just coming back home. And that's how both of my parents were like played a big role in that.
So, what was it like for you and your family, and the other believers in your church? How were you received in the community where you're living in?
Like it was, we were not like we were this, as I said, like second class citizen. Like whenever we go out there, we are like we're like infidel, we're like unclean people. Like in our school, my school was like outside of the town where we were staying, so people didn't know like who I was, and people always thought I was a bad Muslim in school because whenever they're talking about Islam, I always stayed quiet,
Hmm.
and they would ask me questions. I'm like, I don't know anything about it, and they will try to like teach me, which I'm like, no, I'm not interested. Like that's what mom told me. You'll be like very wise when you talk to them. Just
Hmm.
maybe you're a bad Muslim, and they will not even talk to you about that. So that's what I did when I was in school. Versus like in community, so where like our church was, like we had like 30 families living in that city, and all of them they didn't have any good jobs. Even they were educated, like
Yeah.
they like education, but they couldn't get jobs. All they were doing, like they were mopping streets, like that's the old jobs they could do. They were janitors, work in people's home, and that's the only thing they could do. And it's good that, like my mom, she was a nurse. That's how we came to this small town where we were living. And she was a little bit respected because she was working in a hospital, and the people living in that community, in that city, thought she was Muslim. So she had like no trouble in the beginning.
What was it like for the Christian community in the town where you're living? Were there threats against your dad, of course, being the pastor? Were the threats against him and other believers in your community there?
So the Christian community, like living in that city, was about 10 acres of land they were living in. And there was the old church was built by British people. Like it was a long time ago before Pakistan and India was the same country. So in that area, like there was a Muslim person who actually made like like a fake documents. And he said this whole area belongs to him. So what he was doing, he was actually charging people tax. He said, because you're Christians, and if you want to stay here, you have to pay me tax. And when we moved to that area, so my dad said that's wrong. Like they're living in the houses like they belong to their grandparents and they've been living there for a very long time. And that's when the whole threat started. And the church was actually not even open for people to worship. So the person who made these documents and said this land belonged to him, he was putting his animals inside and in times of winter and stuff like that. So that's when this whole thing started because my dad was educated and he said, no, we need to bring this church back to the people it belonged to. And that's when the whole thread started. And people, when they saw my dad, that he has this courage to like support them, and they actually were like that's when like the whole that was a game changer for the whole community of like 30 families of the Christian family living in that small town. And that made even worse. It made worse for other people because those who were working in small like people's home, And they got started getting threats. We need to stop this person, whoever, I don't know where he came from and why what he's doing is gonna make all of you like live like a worse life in here. So it was so that's what this whole thing started.
Oh, so your dad's just trying to improve life. Now, what was the reaction then in terms of, okay, there's the negative reaction, but were there also those that were coming to know the Lord as well because they seen what, what real Christianity looks like?
Yes, so there were few people that they noticed like because we always read in Bible like the way I said it before we are like children of king, right? So that's what my dad was telling them like yeah, you're working as a janitor, but you need to understand the spiritual version. You're better than other people. Like it's that changed the people's life because they had no leader before. And when they saw a leader, it boosted their confidence. And that made a huge difference in that community.
It's the thing is so interesting is that as the kingdom of God advances, as the church grows,
Mhm.
then especially in places like Pakistan and some of the areas, that's where the persecution starts to intensify. So there's a situation that happened one night. You're about 10 years old. It's around midnight. Some people burst into your home. Tell me what happened.
Yes, so this was like after when people were threatening my dad and the family, like, you need to stop about this land. And so the people came into our house and they just start beating us. And
Oh,
because I have a younger brother and he was about 4 or 5 year old at that time. And he hid himself under the bed and they were beating us, they just left us dead, almost like that. We were bleeding. We were like, they dashed me on the floor. I broke my
oh,
tooth and I had a big scar here. So like they thought we were dead and we didn't know what to do, and only my mom like she was like oh like her clothes were torn and it was so worse, like it was really bad. So she like gave us like a first aid to all of us, and like we survived. We survived, and people who actually did that to us later on, this like how did these people survived? Because God was there. We always think like no, there's always a power of God that's taking care of you. He gave my mom that energy. If she was unconscious and she just stood up and she took care of all of us.
oh.
It was a terrible time.
Yeah, a terrible time, and yet a time where the Lord intervened and saved your lives. So this was the first of many attacks over the next few years. Then one day, and we had your story actually on 100 Huntley Street, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on because you understand what's going on in Pakistan and you have a very powerful story. So one day, broad daylight, you were kidnapped. Tell me what happened.
Okay, so I was actually going to get some stuff for my school because I was just graduated to my next grade, and I was just going there to just get stuff from school. And I was just going to the market, and there was a one street where I used to walk. There was no one there, and someone just grabbed me from behind, and I struggled for a little bit, and I just felt unconscious. I didn't know like what happened. Like who were these people? I couldn't scream because their hand was on my face. I couldn't scream. And I don't know how many days later, I woke up and because they were keep like it's basically I don't know what they were doing, but like I just woke up and I thought I was dead because the area I was, it didn't look like where we lived. And I thought maybe I'm dead and I'm in heaven, maybe because the
Oh,
area I was, it's like BC. There was like mountains and it was like a fog. It was beautiful and I was a little
mm,
cold. I'm like, what happened to me? Like, where, like, I had, but like, it took me like a while, like, to, like, what happened to me? Like, what happened? Then I
yeah.
said, I was going to get some stuff from, and people came from, yeah. Then I just stood up, then I saw I was on a ledge of a mountain. And I'm like, how did I get here? Like, what's going on? Then I started shouting, help me. Somebody help me. And I was just shouting for like 20 minutes and no one, because I couldn't even, because I'm not sure, like my throat was so dry and I was still trying to shout. And one person came and looked under the ledge and he's like, who are you? Like, are you high on something or you just fell down? I'm like, I don't know where I am. Then he was a cop and he brought some people over, took me up, and he said, okay, so where are you from? Like, do you live around here? Because they were speaking a different language. Like they were speaking a different kind of like a dialogue. It was a totally different accent. And they said, you don't seem like you're from like, yeah, I'm not from here. I'm from this city. And they're like, oh man, you're like almost like 1,000 kilometers away from home.
Wow.
How did you get here? I'm like, I have no idea. I was going to school. I was going to get some stuff from school, and I just want to get home. Just get me home. I just told them the name of the city, and they said, you have to hitchhike home. like there's like some trucks going that way. So we're gonna just put you in one truck and that truck is gonna get you home. So I went to one truck and I hitchhiked. And throughout the journey, I'm thinking like, why this is happening to me? Is there even a God that, like my dad always told us God is there to take care of you, be in safe hand. Don't worry, he's gonna take care of you. And I'm just thinking, like, like why this happened to me? I'm like, I'm not sure what happened to my parents, if they're alive or not, what happened to my sisters, my brother. This whole journey, like it was a 2-day journey, and I'm just thinking, like, what happened to my parents? So finally got to my town, and as soon as I got off, and I was just walking towards home was like about like 5 kilometers, and I'm just walking, and this guy from our church, he was on his bike, and he looked at me, and he looked at me again. He's like, "Oh, and he says ghost," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Just come on, come on, come on my bike," and he just went to the house and went to the house. We have so many people in the house, and like people were crying, and my mom was crying, and my dad saw me. He's like, "I knew you were coming home. I knew you were coming back." I'm like, "What's going on? Like, did you know where I was? Why did you come save me?" And like my mom, like, and I was so overwhelmed. And then I just took shower and just went to sleep. And when I woke up for like after like I don't know, after 10, 12 hours of sleep, my dad said the day you went to get stuff for your school, you never came home. And we were worried about you. We sent people around to look for you, but we couldn't find you. And then we got a call day after that, and some people said, "We have your son. You have to convert to Islam right now, or we're gonna throw him off this cliff."
Wow.
And if and when once we throw him off the cliff, if he survives, he's gonna break maybe all of his legs or the bones. He won't be able to survive, first of all. If he survives, he's gonna be crippled. My dad said when he was on the phone, God spoke to him and said, "No to them, and I will bring him home."
Oh my.
And my dad said no, and they hung up the phone. And my dad said, your mom haven't spoken to me since then. Because she's like, "How can you do this to your own son? Like it's your own." But my dad said it was the God who was telling me I have to say no, because I have to obey him, and I'm gonna get a reward for it, and see your home. And I was so shocked. I'm like, throughout the journey home, I was thinking there's no God, but
Yeah.
there's actually a God who actually saved me. And I fell, and I'm alive. I have no broken bones. I have scratches here and there. That's fine. But I'm alive. Like that was a game changer for me and for my faith. And that's when I actually got strong faith in that story.
Wow. I mean, that is a powerful story. So, what do you remember about what happened prior to you being knocked unconscious? Did you see these guys coming towards you, or do you just don't have any memory of that?
No, I don't remember. Like I just heard people coming from back, and they really just grabbed me. I don't know. It was so quick, and I don't remember like how that happened.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking of your dad because I'm a dad. I have 4 children and now I have grandchildren, and we all want to hear God's voice. But sometimes go, "Oh, is that really God?" Or, but for your dad, and I can understand your mother's emotions.
Hmm.
But obviously he heard very clearly from the Lord and knew you were going to be protected, even though you went through some very difficult situations. So you get back home. How long did it take you, Anis, to be able to recover from that? And I mean, that would cause PTSD, I'm sure.
Yes, so I sometimes I'm still recovering, I would say, but I'm way stronger. Like it took me years and years and years. I was like even scared to walk alone. Like it was like when I was young, and my parents won't let me out. Like even not just me, but I have two sisters and a brother. Sisters are older than me, and my brother is younger. They won't even let us out of the house. Even sometime now, my mom calls me and say, "Where are you? Like, are you home?" Like even now, she still has that fear. So it
Even though
took
you're
me.
living in Canada.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I
She
can,
still
hey,
has
you know
that
what? I
fear.
understand it.
Yeah. So even if I don't call her, like I usually like call her every day or like just before 9 o'clock. And if I don't call her, she will call me. She's like, "Are you okay?" Or because you usually call before 10, is everything good? So like she still has, I think she still like, has that PTSD, I would say, still suffering with that.
Yeah.
Me, it took me longer. Like it took me like I think 10 years or so. Like I was still like suffering with that. Like I don't want her to walk. And even
Mm.
living here, like I know I'm safe. There's nothing gonna happen to me here. But still, like even through a journey, like after Pakistan, we lived in Sri Lanka for a little while. So that I was like a little bit still scared. But I knew one thing, that God is there to protect me. if he can do that, like no one can touch me. Like when God is on your side, like you don't
Yeah.
need to worry about anything. And that's the only thing that kept me and took me out of that situation.
Yeah, and I know that working with the persecuted church, and I've done many hundreds of interviews, and I've talked to people like yourself, where you really felt that God intervened in your situation. And of course, then there's other situations in Pakistan, Nigeria, and around the world where that's not the case. We're going to talk about a situation that happened last summer where a number of Christians were attacked, churches burned down. But before we get to that, so what's the timeline now? So you have this situation, you return home. You've obviously been traumatized, but your dad didn't just pack up and say, "That's it, we're out of here." So what? Because he's a guy that just said, "Unless God is telling me to move, I'm not leaving." And
Yes.
so it's even how you got to Canada is quite a miraculous story. So you go through this attack. What was going on then? After that, in terms of the church and the situation facing your family there in Pakistan.
So after that stuff happened to us, like people who actually did that to us, and my dad know who did that to us. Actually, they were surprised that I'm home safe, and even my story actually encouraged the people in church, and they actually start spreading the news to the other towns nearby. Like there's this pastor, and this happened to his son, and and church actually grew. We actually had just one town, well, one
Oh,
church, and after that we had three churches in total. So
wow.
my story actually encouraged other people in Pakistan itself and say, if God can bring him from all the way from then, they actually threw him off the cliff, and he had no broken bones, just a few scratches here and there, and church actually grew from there. And actually, it was like a 4 years, we didn't have any problem. There was no persecution. Like the way that my story, thing happened to us, actually helped us, not me, but helped church to grow.
Hmm.
So, and the people who did that to us, even they were surprised. They were like, "Oh yeah, maybe there's a God, or maybe there's a superpower, like they're helping them," and that actually impacted positively.
I call that power evangelism, I guess, when people see the reality of God, and certainly in your life. And we're so grateful that your life was spared, and you're using your testimony here in Canada. And of course, you did in Pakistan, and through interviews, it's getting, all over the world. It's very powerful. But eventually, the persecution did intensify. You and your family were forced to leave that town. I mean, that must have been very difficult especially for your dad, who was the pastor of that church.
Mhm, yes. So during that 3 year time, so I'm mentioning in the beginning, I mentioned about the church that was belonged to that person. So my
Hmm.
dad actually got some lawyers, and there was a whole legal battle that happened. And finally, the people from that church who living there, they finally got that church. So they had a great win, and they didn't have to pay any taxes. So they all had. So that was a great win for them. And that's when
Okay.
people got involved. That's when, like, I would say some political people got involved, and there's like, okay, if this person can win this case, he can do so many bigger things. And that's when they started talking to my dad and saying, okay, now you have to either accept Islam and bring all these people towards Islam, or we're gonna kill you and your family. Like you only have two options. Like either accept Islam and bring all of your followers towards Islam, or you and your family be killed. What we did, you know what we are. They didn't say what they did, but say you know what we are capable of. That's what they told my dad. And my dad, like when we're talking about the voice of God, like the reason he said no at that time when they got a when my dad received a call,
Yeah.
he yeah, so he actually when he was working before he became a pastor, he was working as pharmaceutical salesman.
Okay.
So at that time, God spoke to him to like, you need to leave your job and serve me. So that voice is the same voice that he heard when he said no to me throwing off the cliff. And my dad saying he heard the same voice of God, and God said, you have to leave this town. Like this is you need to leave. And that's when so when they told this to my dad said, look, why don't you give me a day to think about it? He didn't say anything. Why don't you give me a day and I will think about it, and we will come tomorrow and we'll talk about it. And my dad said we need to leave right away. And we only had 20 minutes to leave. Like
Wow.
in a house we lived for 25 years, and we had to like just leave. Like in like what do you take? Like in 20
Yeah.
minutes, like what do you take? And like we just had like just grabbed some of our clothes, my mom packed whatever, and we just left. And we just left and we just went to a different city, which was like about 3 hours from like where we were living, and we're just hiding there and to see what happens next.
Well, that must have been difficult for you, Anise. You're leaving the town that the only place you really knew, your friends, and now you have to leave, but at least you're in a safe situation. But then your dad started to feel that he wanted to go back to that town, and even if he was going to be killed. I mean, this guy obviously has a lot of faith, but how are you and your mom and the rest of your family feeling about that? That your dad wanted to go back and it could cost him his life.
Mhm. Yeah, so when we left our city, then we actually went like to different cities. About like we went around about like 1 year. Like we stayed in different cities. We were hiding to see if the situations, like gets better. We just go back because my from all of us, my dad was devastated because he said, I'm a shepherd and I left my sheeps there." He was like feeling so bad. I have like three churches I've been taken care of, and so many people because of our family's faith, they came closer to God, and
Mm-hmm.
we left them now. And what's going to happen to them? They will say, this pastor, like, he was showing this faith and this happened, and now he left us. So then one day my dad decided, like, we just gonna leave. We're just gonna leave this town, go back, and if they kill us, they kill us. Like, because Bible says, like, in my name they will kill you. Let us be example of that. My mom was like very much against it. She's like, no, God told you to leave that town. God didn't say just stay there. He said leave you. He may have a bigger plan for you. So anyone, let's pray about it tonight. Like, we all pray and see what God tells us. And we woke up in the morning and we were like talking about like, what we're gonna do tomorrow. So my dad said we are not leaving. And my mom said, yes, we're not leaving. I'm like, then I said, my person, I said, when I was sleeping last night, I heard this voice, like, God has a bigger plan for us.
Mm,
And we need to move on. We need to keep going forward. We cannot go back because what we have, maybe God is going to use our story, our
mm.
our experiences to change many lives. And that day we decided, okay, because if God wanted us to stay there, he would have or made a way for us, or maybe told my dad, or who told me, or told my parents, my sisters, my brother. Like, even my brother say, like, he had very uncomfortable like feeling going back. God spoke to him as well and say, no, 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 you cannot go back. I have a bigger plan for you. So it was, in the beginning it was very hard. Then later on, the confidence and the God like that we knew that we have to move on. We have to move forward. We cannot just go back and get killed. And so God spoke to pretty much all of us and said, this is not the time to go back because I have a bigger plan for you. And God has something that we knew. God has a bigger plan for us. Through our story, we had so many people came closer to God. Maybe God has more for us, and that more is going to bring more people.
There is a time when our brothers and sisters are killed for their faith, and the Lord uses that testimony. And then there's other times, and your family would be definitely in that category, that he had something else for you to do. So how long was it then before you actually left the country of Pakistan and ended up in Sri Lanka, then eventually to Canada? We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But what were the circumstances then to actually leave Pakistan?
Awesome. So my dad actually, after they consulted few churches and a few pastors and say, like where I'm gonna go, like, like I cannot go back. And they all said you have to leave Pakistan because all these people, like Muslim, they all have network. Any city you go, they're gonna find you because you'll be new to that city, and that network is gonna find you somehow that you're new to town and where you came from. You need to leave Pakistan. Then my dad said, like, where are we gonna go? Like, we don't know anywhere outside of Pakistan. Where are we gonna leave? So during that time, there was a something called SARC. Like, it's actually Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka. They all get together and, like, in one country, right? And that time, Sri Lanka was the country where, like, they all were getting together. And someone suggested my dad, why don't you go to Sri Lanka? Because it's open port. You don't need visa. Or sorry, you need visa, but you will be easily get that visa. Because usually visa takes about 2 to 3 months. And instead you may get like maybe 2 months or something like that. So my dad said, sure, we can try that. So this is a great testimony. So we were so scared of our life, even going outside of the city or the place we were living in. So we went to this embassy and to deposit our visas for deposit our passport for visas. And like it's just won't be like how God works.
Hmm.
Usually take if you expedite it, it takes like a month for you to get visa. So in the morning we went there and we gave them our passports. And the evening they called us that your visas are ready.
What? Wow.
Yes, it was that fast, and we were like praying, like God, like how that happened. Like it was so fast, and like we got the tickets, and now we were so scared to leave Pakistan. We're like, what if they, because when they put blasphemy on you, your names is all over the place. Like in government, like you cannot leave Pakistan, you cannot leave the country. And my dad was so scared. What's going to happen when we go to, like, nothing happened to us. We went to the airport, like they scanned our passport, asked the question, where you going? We're going to Sri Lanka for a visit. And they said, sure, you're good to go. And
Mm.
and nothing happened to us. And God was like opening doors for us. Like the way he said, don't go back. I have a bigger plan for you. He like actually had everything laid out for you, for us, for all of us. We had no issue through getting visas or getting through immigration and everything. God opened that door for us, and that's how we went to Sri Lanka.
So you go to Sri Lanka during that time. There's a civil war. There is a tsunami. It was a difficult time, of course, in Sri Lanka. What did you guys do while you were there? Were you still involved in ministry? And then what was the timeline in terms of actually then coming to Canada?
So we when we went to Sri Lanka, I just want to share a little bit of our journey. So
Sure.
in Sri Lanka, we just got off the airport and we didn't know anyone in Sri Lanka. And we didn't know, we had no plans what we're gonna do. So we got off we just went outside of the airport and there was a cab there. And my dad saw the cab driver has a cross. And Sri Lanka is a very open country. Like they don't have any, like, no, you can openly express your religion, right? So my dad saw this person has a cross. He probably Christian. My dad said, why don't you take me to your church? And he's like, sure, I'll take you. But do you know anyone in my church? Dad's like, yes, just take me there. So we went to this church, and because we didn't know anyone there, so there was a chapel which is open, right? You can just go in and pray. And as soon as we went there, my dad went inside the chapel and started praying.
Mm.
And when I'm saying, God, you're the same in Sri Lanka and same in Pakistan. Like, you need to open door for us here. We need, like, find us someone, or maybe we need your help. Open door for us here. So while I was praying, someone tapped my shoulder and asked me to come out. And I went out and talked to this person. He's like, who are you guys? You're speaking different language. Which country are you guys from? Then I just opened up everything. I'm like, I'm from Pakistan, and they're trying to kill us because we're Christian.
Wow.
I just opened up everything to him. And he's like, okay, can you bring your parents? I want to talk to them. And then I brought my dad this person was speaking English, and my English was not good. And I was just trying, I was speaking broken English and trying to translate what my dad is trying to tell him. And that person was saying, like, he doesn't like this church where we are right now. And each and every time he crosses path from this church, he actually curses that church. But today, when he was crossing path, something told me, go inside and help someone. And he said he came in and he saw us. And he said, I want to help you guys. What can I do? And then when my mom heard this, she's like, oh, maybe he's maybe from Pakistan, maybe he knows some people,
Yeah.
maybe he's thinking of all that. My dad is like, no, we were praying here, and God brought this man here in our life. Like there has to be something. So this person brought us to his own town. Like my mom was very scared throughout the journey. It was like an hour drive.
Mm.
Like, what if he's taken back to some Muslim people? What they will kill us here? Like my dad's like, don't worry. Like, it's he has so much comfort. Like this is happening. This is going to be something good's going to happen. We went to his town, and turns out he was the mayor of that small town. And he said, I will take care of you guys. This is my other house. You can stay here. And I'm not Christian, but I will connect you to Christian people. Like,
Wow.
and he connected us to church. There was one church in Colombo, and we were like, and we were there for 3.5 years. And there was a war. There was like so much things was happening in Sri Lanka, and God actually used our story to bring so many people closer to Him. People were like, "Yes, you were you people like, why you're always happy? Your faces are like you're here a visitor. You're like visitor, like coming from like a rich country." Like I'm like, this happiness is from God. Like, yes, we lost our home, we lost our church, we lost everything, but we know we haven't lost God yet. He's always with us. His presence, His favor is always with us. And I can lose everything in the world. I don't want to lose the favor of God. That was our message to all the people in Sri Lanka. And because of that, people said, yes, this is great. Like they lost homes because of war, because of tsunami, but they always had like a God, like which was keeping them alive. And that was our journey in Sri Lanka. It was 3.5 years. It was an amazing time.
So 3.5 years in Sri Lanka. How did it work then for you to come to Canada? Had you made an application as a family to come to Canada?
Yes, so we wanted to actually. My dad was originally planning to stay in Sri Lanka,
Okay.
in school down, and when he moved back to Pakistan. And then what happened in Sri Lanka, like they were saying you cannot stay here longer because you have to. Okay, so when we go to Sri Lanka, we were in a visitor visa, but someone said you have to go through UNHCR and get your asylum seeker status so you can stay in Sri Lanka legally.
Okay.
So we said, okay, we'll stay here as long as we can, then we'll go back. And but someone said you cannot go because the situation in Pakistan was not getting better. Like it was getting worse, and we were staying connected with them. So someone said we had to find a third country. Like you cannot stay in Sri Lanka, we cannot go back, so to find a third country to go. And we didn't know where to go, and like we didn't know anyone outside of Sri Lanka or any other country. And then someone connected my dad to someone who lived in Canada who was actually persecuted in 90s, and he lived in Canada. And so we got the email, and we said, why don't you email this pastor, maybe he can help you, maybe open door, for you guys to come to Canada. So I sent an email to this pastor, and we were waiting 1 month gone, 2 month gone, and third month, and we got a response from a pastor, and he said, I'm so sorry, like this is the email you sent me is from my website and never check it. And today
Well,
I was just happened to be on this email and just saw your email, and I read your story. I'm so sorry for not getting back to you earlier. And tell me, what can I do? And we we spoke to the pastor, and he totally understand how, because he was persecuted, and what.
understood. Yeah.
Yeah, he understood totally. And then he got us connected here. There's a church in Burlington. It's in Waterdown, Ontario. It's a Christian Reformed church. He connected us through them, and they actually sponsored us to come to Canada as a permanent resident.
And what year was that?
It was in 2011. So we came here in December 2011.
Okay. And so what has your family then been doing since that time? I know you share your testimony about
Yes.
not giving up because
Yes.
that was your that's your story.
Yes.
But what's life like then been in Canada? Because I'm sure you miss home,
Yeah.
Pakistan, but
Mhm.
also you appreciate the freedom and the opportunities that you're getting in Canada. So tell me about your family, Anis, your dad. He's a pastor. I know he wants to go back to Pakistan. But what has your family been doing all these years?
Okay, so when we came here, so we started like getting Canada gave me a first job. We went to school, we got educated, and what we were doing, we're trying to rebuild the churches back home. Like my dad, we cannot go back, but what we can do, we can help.
Right.
So we do lots of help back in Pakistan. We actually rebuilt because some of our churches were like broken into, and one of them they burnt. So we built a new church, and now what we're doing right now is actually educating kids. So and we actually providing education to lots of girls, like because lots of girls there, they go to Muslims people house and to work and stuff, which is not a very good environment, because that's when they got raped and they got forced married into like older men's and stuff like that. So what we're doing now in Pakistan, we're actually providing them education of sewing, like they are learning how to sew, maybe one day they can start their own business. So we're just teaching like skills to lots of people. And also we still have a church, one church which is being, like, we have a building where we're actually having a sewing school. We actually have a Sunday school where kids come and learn about God and stuff like that. And that's what we're doing back in Pakistan. And here we're just sharing our story to whoever we meet. We just tell them, like, no, like in we actually feeling the persecution coming into Canada in a different
Mm,
way.
yes.
It's coming, like we need to tell you, like, to stay strong, like stay, because God is there to help you, like because Bible says, like, because being Christian is not easy. You will be persecuted because they hated Jesus, they're gonna hate you. And that's what my message is throughout our family. We're just sharing it here wherever we go, like, do not give up. That's like God, because you're chosen one. Because if persecution comes, that's mean you're the chosen one. You're the chosen one, and God is going to use you for a bigger purpose.
He will, and it's interesting you talk about Canada because I work been in Pakistan and Nigeria, even Sri Lanka. Some of the challenges our brothers and sisters face, especially in the rural areas. From Buddhist monks, people are often surprised about that. But in Canada, the challenge is for churches not to compromise, especially when we're dealing with this whole sexual revolution and what the Bible teaches. It is contradicting and really confronting our culture, and people don't want to hear that. So that it's going to get more difficult. So we need, to hear testimonies like yourself where you've gone through these things. God can protect you. We need to stand up. But these are very challenging times, in Canada as well. And we need to, continue to pray and ask the Lord for wisdom as your dad did. And as your, dad heard from the Lord, we need to hear from the Lord and how we navigate between the love and mercy and grace of God, but also speaking the truth. And man, we need the Holy Spirit in everything that we do. Whether it's in situations like in Pakistan or in Canada, because we're all under warfare. That's just the reality wherever you live. For some reason, I think many Christians in Canada thought that we're kind of exempt from that. But of course, we're seeing things that, can change in a hurry. And these are scary times, but also times where we can have opportunity, for the Lord to move. We talked a little bit about off the top, Anise, about, your reaction when you hear some of these stories. So last August, actually, thousands of believers were attacked. And, people had stormed the Christian colony in Jaranwala. That's a town in Faisalabad in Punjab province. And again, we talked about, these allegations, these false allegations of blasphemy, and spurred on by an announcement. So you have it broadcast over the mosque, loudspeakers, a mob comes in, and then they start destroying things. And they're not really there to hear about if there's any truth to it, but they just go on a rampage. And I think the last I'd heard, about 30 church buildings, maybe even more, were destroyed. 40 homes, 400 homes actually belonging to Christians were destroyed. So again, when you hear that, personally, it must cause you some anxiety, but then also you think about the people that are going through these things.
Yeah, like it's like the problem there is because of this blasphemy law we have in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Because people are misusing that. Like there's like, let's say if you're lending someone money and they're not returning your money and they're Christian, you just say, okay, he said something about Islam, he said something about Muhammad, he's something about Quran. And you can just say, and this one person, and problem is they don't even investigate whether it's truth or not. And they just announce that, and the whole town is suffering now just because of this one allegation, which is not even true. So this is so like, and the government of Pakistan is not even doing anything about it. They will just come and say, "Oh, this happened. Oh, yeah, that's it," and then they just brush it under the rug. They're not even working on this thing, and living here, it doesn't feel right sometimes. Like we left Pakistan because the persecution and people are still suffering. The good thing is, like, living here, we can do something about them. We can, like, maybe awareness, we can tell people here what's going on, what people are going through in Pakistan, and maybe we can raise funds for them. And what's happening in Pakistan. I'm not sure how it's gonna work out. Is the blasphemy law that they need to remove?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of protests. There's Shabazz Bhatti. You probably know him. He was the only Christian in the Pakistani government, and he protested against when Asya Bibi, a well-known case that we covered for many years, was accused of blasphemy. And even if there's an argument and people get into, well, this is what I believe Jesus said, and this is why we believe Christianity is right, and people are people, and even if somebody does say something against the Quran or Muhammad, they shouldn't be put into prison and sentenced to death. You have to be very careful. But as you mentioned, like 295C, that blasphemy law, which I understand was actually originally put into place to protect all religions. Of course, now Pakistan being a majority Muslim country, it's being misused, and it obviously needs to change. And I don't know if that'll ever happen, but against Christians and non-Muslims. And then when you hear about these young girls, Christian girls, as you mentioned, helping them get skills so they don't have to work in the homes of these Muslim families where they are sexually assaulted, converted to Islam. So when we talk about all these things and people go, wow, man, Pakistan, it's a lost cause. It's a failed state, all that. But yet there is hope here. In spite of all that is going on, many are coming to know Jesus, and God's kingdom is advancing in spite of all that persecution.
Yes, that's correct. The way I said, like when I got kidnapped and when I came back, the church grew. Like, persecution makes you stronger sometimes, and it makes you stronger. Church grows. And when living here, you can give people more hope. Like
Right.
we actually, when we, like after coming to Canada, after 2 years, like what we did, we actually raised money from our own family. Like what we're raising own family. So in Pakistan, there's a brick cleanse, like people who make bricks. They're actually living under slavery. So what we're doing, and they have kids like 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old working in a brick kiln making bricks. So we're like sending money to them, actually taking them away from that kind of environment, because that's what we can do. We can give them a hope and say, there's a God, and you're chosen ones. Like, you're still a part of His kingdom. Like, it's you're better than what you're saying, because but they tell them in Pakistan, infidel, you're unclean. But no, you're not. You are part of God's family. So we have to give them hope, and this actually helps church growth as well.
Well, the church will grow no matter what. The kingdom of God is advancing, the Bible says, by force. And we know that the Lord is working in the midst of the most difficult situations. I'm just so grateful that, for you, your dad, your family, you've come to Canada, but you haven't forgotten about the people back in Pakistan. I'm on Facebook, like most people, and I would say I probably have, I don't know if every pastor in Lahore on my, on Facebook, but many. So I'm constantly hearing what's going on, and I'm seeing many of the wonderful things that are going now. People need to be careful, especially when it comes to people asking for money. And I have, many friends in, Pakistan, and there's some scams. So we need to have that wisdom of the Lord, but we also need to help. And that's part of what Voice of the Martyrs does as well with the sewing machines. And I've been in Pakistan up into the north, and seeing how women are getting together, Muslims and Christians, and because of that kindness, many are coming to Jesus, and that's the thing. We just can't throw up our hands and say, well, Pakistan, it's just too far gone. No, there are people there, and it's heartbreaking. I've been in those brick kilns, and I've seen people that have been forced into slavery. It's a horrible thing, but I'm grateful that you, your family, and Christian community here in Canada are helping our brothers and sisters in Pakistan. Anis, before we leave, the thing I always want to do, because it is the most important thing we can do, and that is to pray. Can you pray for our brothers and sisters in Pakistan? They're facing many challenges, and also for ministries around the world that are trying to help our brethren, God's family, our family in Pakistan. So can you lead us in prayer?
Awesome. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this opportunity so we can talk about your grace, your love for all your people, oh God, and how you brought us here, and your love for all the people, oh God. Especially remember all the Christian people who are being persecuted around the world, not just in Pakistan, and everywhere in Africa, in Middle East, and everybody. God, we remember them right now and give them your mighty hand. And we just tell them, you are the only hope they have, oh God. Just be with them. And just tell them you're with them. Just open doors for them, oh God. And I also pray for people living in North America, that they are helping them, oh God. Just bless them more and more and more, oh God. And be with all the people who are going through they're in the prisons, oh God, and they are living very bad life right now because they are Christians, oh God. Just be with them, and just tell them that you're the hope, and there's an open door for them as well, oh God. Just be with them all the time, oh God, and ask all the blessings in your name. Amen.
Amen. Anis Khan, thank you so much for sharing your story, your family story, and how God is working, through you and your dad and your whole family. And I'm always encouraged when I hear the stories of how God protects. And again, I admire your dad. I've not met him. I've seen stories of him. He's obviously I guess we'd say a straight shooter. He understands what the Bible teaches on these things. And, given, opportunity, I know he would go back, and yet the Lord, uses us in various ways, to be able to communicate and help, our brothers and sisters. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that. And so another thing that I want to mention that we're doing, actually, we are working on writing a book about our story. So because I wanna make this story more aware of living in North America or wherever, so we can learn more about persecution and what happens, because we actually experienced it. So I wanna that's everything else we're doing as well.
Well, I look forward to seeing your book, and we'll have you back on to talk more about that. And, for those that are watching and listening today, if I could ask you to write a review of this podcast or share it with a friend so more people will hear about some of the things that are happening around the world. God's kingdom is moving forward in spite of persecution. And so people be praying and how we can help our brothers and sisters that are suffering so they know that they are not alone. Again, Anis, thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you.
And remember, the closer you are to Jesus, the closer you are to the fire.